The team is made up of players from all over the country, so getting together for a training session has been difficult. However, they did manage to meet in Newcastle over the weekend and were happy to train for hours at a time.
That's our biggest problem. We practice very hard, and the guys put a pretty good effort. But you know, like everything else, you're starting to get tired and you relax and you're not doing it right, and then you tend not to do what you're being told. You just want to do the easy things. And that's the time that they got to put twice as much effort than before.
Australia is currently ranked 12th in the world, which isn't bad considering our players are all amateurs and the European teams are fully professional. It's expected talent scouts for some of the pro clubs will be keeping an eye on the Australians during the tour, something that doesn't bother the Aussie coach.
I hope they are, because that will mean that the guys that want to put even a bigger and better effort to get into whatever they want to take them.
And Coach Munoz is determined the Australian team will be noticed. Most of the drills have centred on going over and over tactics.
That's what Australian teams lack, being together and practicing and having some tactics. So when we get out there, we look like at least that we know what we're doing.
The team flies out of Sydney next Monday, and a good performance on the South American tour could see the players return with a higher world ranking.
A combination of our outdoor lifestyle and fair-skinned population may be the key factors to earning the hunter the dubious honour of being Australia's skin cancer capital.
We have the highest incidence in Australia and probably in the world, and that means the largest number of people in a unit population get melanoma. So we have to concentrate on early detection, early treatment, because that can cure rather than leaving it too late, and which has fatal results.
A dimly lit room at a business club lunch seemed far away from the scorching sun lovers were experiencing on a nearby beach, but a slideshow brought the message home nonetheless. Newcastle's melanoma clinic is currently treating 2,500 patients. Australia-wide, there's one new diagnosis every day.
There are a lot of employers here today, and they have a responsibility to their employees who are working outdoors to provide them with prevention and protection, for when they're outdoors.
Melanoma Awareness Week will be conducted in Newcastle from the 7th to the 13th of March. There'll be a fashion parade and also an activities day on the foreshore, aimed at making people more aware of how to recognise and treat skin cancers.
In the winter time, people tend to forget about mould, tend to forget about their skin problems, so that's the time then we ought to concentrate on checking over in the off season, when things can be done with minimal problem.
Trench-coated private eyes pounding the pavement and working from dingy upstairs offices are mostly confined to fiction.
I don't know about the trench coat. I certainly don't own one. We go through the shoe leather and we are upstairs, but there's no neon signs and there's not too many blondes.
Security firms spend most of their time serving subpoenas or calling in bad debts, but they also cover surveillance work. Hidden cameras play a part, but computer information searches are more likely the stuff of an investigator's day-to-day work. The chairman of a security inquiry, Stephen Much, who reports back to the police minister, was in Newcastle today conducting a review of businesses.
We've got to really set down in black and white what sort of information can be obtained by investigators. But the main thing, I think, is to make sure that when information is released, the people it's being released to are properly trained, that they're the people that are of good fame and character, and also that they're obtaining the information for the proper pursuit of a legitimate investigation.
There are about 30 private investigation companies around Newcastle. Alan Harries, president of the Hunter branch of the Institute of Mercantile Agents, operates a business with 17 investigators. He sees the review as a positive move.
It's obviously something we're not accustomed to, but we're quite grateful that the government's giving an opportunity to tidy up our industry and see whether or not we can bring it into the modern day world of accountability. That's what we desire, and we're looking forward to it.
Standing in for Deputy Prime Minister Brian Howe, Parliamentary Secretary Dr Andrew Theophanous announced details of the Inner Newcastle Affordable Housing Strategy. Of the $100 million in federal and state government funds earmarked for revitalising the city, 1/4 will be used for housing. $5.5 million will be spent on innovative residential designs, $7 million on creating a program for community and special needs housing, the remaining $12.5 million to build up to 150 new rental units for low-income earners, part of the 5,000 dwellings planned for the next 20 years.
Housing would be available at a cost rent, that is, there would be some subsidy. It would be less than market rent.
We're trying to encourage more inner city development because there's been too much expansion of the urban sprawl, and especially the bigger cities.
Overseeing the project will be a newly appointed Housing Strategy Officer, $150,000 made available to Newcastle Council for a 3-year contract.
The next job is to see that we build houses on those sites and get people here, and that's his or her job.
While in Newcastle, Dr Theophanous also launched a national seminar on manufactured home estates. Around 100 delegates discussed the growing industry of relocatable homes and the need for effective planning of services for those choosing a more affordable lifestyle.
Nearly 700 Australians received organ transplants last year, including new hearts, lungs and livers. But due to a lack of donors, 3,000 people are still waiting for the often life-saving operation. 1 in 5 will die before they get a transplant. The Madawi Lions Club took the first step to shorten that death list today by donating an organ transplant education kit to Year 12 students at Irrawang High. It includes a video and booklet to explain how transplants work and how people can give consent for their organs to be used when they die.
These children are approaching adulthood, at least our senior students are. They are going to be opinion formers, and they will influence their parents, they'll influence their younger brothers and sisters, and if they understand and if they donate, it increases the chance of others so doing.
I think that it's a worthwhile cause if you've got something that is still usable to give to other people who are needing of it.
A representative from Hunter Hospital spoke to the students, but the most convincing argument for organ donations came from Barry Evans, living proof transplants save lives.
Well, I'm alive, and that's the main thing. And people that have had transplants, and after the transplant, the difference is unbelievable.
Barry had one message for the students and the community.
Please sign your licence to be a donor.
Meet Broderick Knight on lead vocals, Steve McBride lead guitar, Gary Murtagh and Mick Gemmell on acoustics, and Al Warland on bass.
Well, me and Gaz sort of just sat around one afternoon on a Sunday, and we're watching the videos, you know, on the bushfires. And look, we've seen all the pain and people were going through, and how the firemen that were fighting the fires. And Gary said, "Geez, we ought to write a song." And I said, "Yeah, that'd be a good idea." And 7 hours later, we had a song down at the bushfires. And that night it went live ABC radio.
A number of recording company executives just happened to be listening to ABC radio that night, liked the tune and introduced the group to several recording studios. Now releasing an album may soon become a reality. However, if a CD is released, they will not collect any money.
No, I think all royalties should go to the people that did suffer through the bushfires.
It was a casual training session near his Valentine home for the 18-year-old Middleby after the news of his selection in the Australian squad. It's been a meteoric rise for Middleby, who started playing soccer only 6 years ago after breaking both collarbones in a rugby league match. But league's loss has been soccer's gain, with the midfielder training at the Australian Institute of Sport for the last 2 years before joining the Breakers in December. His selection in the Australian squad is a reward for his dedication to the game, giving up other working opportunities to concentrate on soccer. It's not his first overseas trip, having toured with a combined AIS team last year.
I play better when I play overseas. You know, there's a bit more hype involved, and the crowd is hard, but in the other fact, it's you know, it lifts you up to a higher standard, I think.
Middleby's immediate goal is a good game in Adelaide over the weekend and a successful tour, but his long-term future seems destined for much greater things.
Next year, definitely the World Youth Cup, which is in Nigeria. That's my goal for the youth team, and then after that, maybe the Olympics in '96.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
It's been 3 years since Newcastle had teams in the Sydney competition, and although it doesn't start till next month, the players from both Division State League sides are already getting into shape. Newcastle Netball has enlisted the help of fitness consultant Dennis Pitt, who also works with senior rugby league and union clubs around the region. For the next 3 weeks, Dennis will work on the women's strength, agility and speed. Fiona Wilton, who travels from Muswellbrook each week, displayed plenty of pre-season pace during the sprint trials, her scintillating speed ripping the parachute off, it ending up wrapped around our camera. The seniors representative team has received an early boost, with Donna Broadbent and Danielle Harvey named in the state under-19 squad earlier this week. Coupled with their achievement, seniors team coach Bruce Linky believes the entry into the Sydney competition will benefit other local players.
The problem I've had in the past is that our girls would go down in trials and compete very well and match Sydney-based players, but the question that was always asked, can they compete in match conditions? We haven't seen them perform.
The State League competition starts April 23rd. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The young woman is a resident of the university's Evatt House. At 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, she was making her way back to her accommodation along one of the university's bush pathways when she was attacked.
Yeah, you might expect a campus the size of this one, with the population that we have, to have those sorts of incidents from time to time, but not 4 o'clock during the afternoon. It's just incredible that occurred.
Police were told a youth riding a push bike approached the girl as she walked and, after asking directions, wrestled her to the ground and groped at her body. The young woman screamed for help and the attacker fled.
The university also has a system where we will provide some escort for students in certain circumstances if they are concerned. But generally we want them to stay on the major pathways, the lighted pathways. Yes, travel in groups. That sometimes means a little inconvenience, I suppose, in terms of waiting, but particularly after hours, it really is important that they be aware of the sorts of difficulties that can occur.
Extra security guards have been appointed and the university has produced a pamphlet notifying students of possible risks to their safety.
The university takes very seriously its responsibility for the welfare of staff and students, and particularly the last couple of years we've enhanced the level of security on the campus quite considerably.
827 separate fires raged out of control across New South Wales for 3 weeks this summer. Remarkably, there were relatively few losses. Police and Emergency Services Minister Terry Griffiths was in Maitland to say thank you to those involved in the Hunters firefighting effort. But before the awards were presented, he had this to say about the findings of last week's ICAC report, which recommended criminal charges or disciplinary action against some police. The Minister praised the efforts of those police involved in fighting the fires, along with the efforts of the Bushfire Brigade, National Parks and Wildlife Service, charities and a number of other organisations.
Looking more like a leisurely stroll than an educational experience, more than 50 primary and high school teachers have spent the last 2 days exploring the environmental and historical features of Port Macquarie and surrounding areas. The visit to the Hastings was the brainchild of Matthew Bradley from Port Macquarie's Environmental Appreciation Centre.
It's shown a good commitment from teachers from all over the state who have come to see what's available in the area.
With view to bringing school excursions to the area, the teachers spent time at Sea Acres, Timbertown and Port's Koala Hospital. Overwhelmed by teacher response to the visit, another weekend is being planned for the near future, with an invitation extended to the Minister of Education, Virginia Chadwick.
The Knights' first grade side that ran onto Caltex Field was a completely different lineup to the team that ended up finishing the game. Matthew Rodwell and Brad Godham were both playing well until they were injured, and after 6 months off, Paul Harrigan was also back to his old tricks. However, he finished with a thigh cork. Mark Sargent also suffered the same injury, while winger David Smith later left the field with concussion. The Knights played 60 minutes of intense football but were denied 7 tries due to forward passes or being held up over the line. Despite the setbacks, coach David Waite said it was a much improved performance on last week's win against Parramatta.
Held at Port Macquarie's Wood Strait complex, the Hunter Region Championships featured teams geographically not in the Hunter at all. Host club Port Macquarie, Newcastle and Lake Macquarie officially make up the region, but an invitation was extended to the Tamworth team to even up the championships. The abundance of talent in the Lake Macquarie team became obvious at the start of play this morning, and they remained undefeated throughout the day. The Lake Macquarie team will now travel westward for the state championships to be held in Tamworth on the 10th of April.
Good morning, RSPCA, Pam speaking.
The Toronto Assistance Centre is an offshoot of the Baptist Church, operating from a converted cottage to cater for the needs of about 150 people. On Friday night, a fire was set in a used furniture storage area. It spread quickly through the building. Volunteers picked through the wreckage today to see what could be salvaged.
The rest will be straight to the dump. There is, as I'd say, 95% loss of our stock here in the op shop, and we'll bounce back. It is disappointing when we come in and see the years of building up a good little business that did support our welfare section just go up in smoke.
The Baptist Church Hall on Toronto's Boulevard will be used as a temporary welfare centre. Police have charged a 13-year-old boy with arson and are looking for a 19-year-old in relation to the blaze.
We just feel sorry that there are children and young people with that attitude, and that's what we're about, trying to show people that there's a better way of life. And
much of what Geldof is best known for, his involvement in Band Aid, Live Aid, the Boomtown Rats, Not Liking Mondays and a knighthood, are all now considered excess baggage to the star, who's travelling light around Australia.
I sort of took it into my head a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, that I just wanted to go and see places, and I've got a job where I'm able to do that. And I got a taste for going through the smaller towns of Australia last year, and I want to do more of it.
Geldof has toured Western and Southern Australia and is now heading up the East Coast, playing at pubs against the backdrop of a Hawkesbury River sunset or the Newcastle Steelworks skyline is reward enough for the singer, who for the time being has had his fill of the world stage.
So, you know, when you sort of think, I'd like to see these places, I'd like to go out there and play to those people, I like them, and I like where they live, and I want to see it. It's hardly a career move, you know. You know, bank managers throughout Britain are not turning somersaults of delight, you know. And you're not going to sell 6 zillion records. But so what?
Geldof has gone back to folk roots in some of his latest music. He's also known for his political and social comment, film roles and as an author, but insists he's not pushing a particular bandwagon on this trip. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
It was a bit sloppy, he said, or mushy, I think was Matthew's terms. But after suffering one of those sorts of injuries myself, it's more physical pain in the short term and more mental anguish in the long term. And young Anthony Del Santo, as I feel for, he's still in St George Hospital from the weekend with a shattered kneecap, so he won't be home till Wednesday. So it was a fairly dramatic day at Caltex Field.
Jesmond Primary School was a symbolic venue for the Newcastle launch of the 5th campaign aimed at saving the environment for Australia's children. Newly named Australian of the Year and clean-up organiser Ian Kiernan praised Newcastle for its commitment to the scheme that has grown from a local to an international event. Volunteers in Newcastle will join more than 400,000 others from throughout the country, with 700 towns and cities participating in the country's biggest clean-up.
The whole activity has expanded. There's much more enthusiasm there. That's evident here in Newcastle today.
The usual targets are roadsides, waterways and illegal dump sites. But this year, areas burnt by bushfires will also be cleared of rubbish.
What the bushfires have done, whilst they've been a real tragedy, they have at least exposed all of this illegally dumped rubbish. And we're taking this as an opportunity to collect and remove that rubbish.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Images of Australian POWs slaving on the Burma Railway or in work camps shocked the nation at the war's end, but there were other cases, untold tales of atrocity. Author Don Wall set out to trace the fate of many of his comrades who were imprisoned in the Sandakan camp in Borneo and made to work on a Japanese airstrip. Nearly 1,800 were systematically murdered by the Japanese.
It was the worst single tragedy suffered by Australians during World War II.
Many of the families of the Sandakan POWs had no idea of what became of their loved ones until Don's book came out.
Since 1988, but they're still finding out. It's not unusual for each week for someone to make contact with me and say, can you tell me anything about so-and-so?
Many of those who died joined up from the Hunter, the New England and Northern New South Wales. The Sandakan Memorial Association plans to honour them with monuments in Tamworth and Newcastle.
The sole aim is to honour all those who were lost in Borneo in bronze in their district of origin.
From about 1915 to 1930, the land behind these cottages was used as orchards and market gardens.
They were the initial source of vegetables and fruit for most of the people in Newcastle.
The National Parks and Wildlife Service acquired the houses and fruit packing shed 6 years ago. During that time, and for the decade before, the building stood idle. Today, work began tearing down the residence owned by Arthur Bailey.
It became unsafe, the roof was flying off it, and it's full of white ants, the water's got into it, and unfortunately we're having to make that decision.
Later this month, the service will release a plan outlining how the remaining buildings and the entire Glenrock State Recreation Area on which they stand will be managed.
And as funding becomes available, we'll be working in accordance with the conservation plan.
Jane Anderson, NBN News.